thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
I think that we just had a great transition from that conversation to this one because of the kind of work that you guys have done, particularly in aligning your schools. And I want to say that in your tenure, you've already had a pretty big reinvention initiative. This has been your mission. Can you give us sort of the Reader's Digest version of what this really means?
So I think reinvention was about simply changing the paradigm of community colleges. I think traditionally community colleges have been built on a paradigm of access. Everybody having access to education, which is essentially true and should happen. But if you don't have success and have that defined and have that measurable and everybody held accountable to it, then you end up with a 7% graduation rate like we had when I started reinvention. So it's about coupling success with access, being able to measure what that looks like and holding everybody accountable to it while operating efficiently.
So you specifically went into the process realigning the schools within your system. In a rather pragmatic way, I would say, and in connection with business.
Exactly. So we did an 18-month study to look at what industries and jobs would dominate our region over the next decade. And once we knew what that looked like, we then created what we call centers of excellence through our college to careers in order to to bring together our best talent, to be able to strategically know where our capital investments could go, and to offer the highest quality in each one of those industries. Traditionally, community colleges have tried to be everything to everybody, and in a world that is constantly changing and becoming more skill-based, it's now about the quality and not about the quantity.
That has led to some controversy.
Oh, just a little.
But in the larger question, Chancellor Amiridis, if you could speak to that, I mean, how we know now that a lot of students are going the community college, transitioning to institutions like yours. What's happening here, and how does this better prepare them for the workforce?
Well, what we see is that the more traditional model of somebody finishing high school at the age of 18 and then going straight to college for 4 years is still dominant, but the trend shows that there are more and more people that they have to follow alternative pathways because of socioeconomic reasons, because of work, because of family. You see veterans, you see students who have to support members of their family, that they choose alternative pathways. And four-year institutions, especially institutions like the University of Illinois at Chicago, who is very proud to serve the mission of educating an urban population, has to adapt to be able to create these pathways and make them seamless. That's exactly what we try to do with the city colleges. This year, we welcome on campus around 3,000 new freshmen, which are the typical students that you would get at the age of 18 or 19. But we also welcome on campus around 1,500 transfers. So you see, it's almost 1/3 for us. And I think the trends are that this percentage is growing. So you need to adjust, you need to prepare, you need to create the partnerships, you need to make sure that the students are welcome, and you need to make sure that they have everything that they need to be successful.
One of the areas that has created controversy in your campus, but also in this larger issue of what is the relationship between business and the interests of business and higher education. After all, you know, we think of higher education as an opportunity for young people to learn the breadth, the intellectual depth of, and maybe, are you going too pragmatic? Are you going too focused on work and maybe ignoring some of those larger things?
That's a hard question for me to answer because it's hard for me to conceive how education goes too pragmatic to prepare our future. Who else prepares our future? We're here now talking about the future of work. Work means someone has to be prepared to do something. Who else prepares our future for that if it's not our educational institutions? If you ask any student why they come to our institution, you know, I was once told very forcefully that our students come to us to discover themselves. Well, that could be true. I've just never met the student who's told me that's why they've came to my institution. I do believe that students are coming to our institution to discover themselves, their future, but they want to make sure they're doing it down a relevant pathway. So this whole notion of we talk about work, then education, I just don't understand that. I mean, I went to school so that I could become a computer scientist and then go get my MBA and do other things. So that's why our students come to us. Our educational institutions, particularly our higher educational institutions, must understand that we are increasingly playing a bigger role in developing our future workforce. And for community colleges, not only are we playing a bigger role in that, but we play an even larger role on students keeping their debt down, for we are the first option and the gateway to very good four-year institutions.
I think there is a little bit of a difference between community colleges and a four-year university. We need to have a balance, and I believe that we have two obligations towards our students and the parents. One is to prepare them for a successful professional career, and the second one is to educate them as citizens, because we need educated citizens. We need educated citizens that they're civically engaged, that they're socially conscious. We need this in this country now more than ever. Now, given the discussions that actually were before us, how do you prepare for a professional career when you don't know in some cases what jobs are going to be out there in 10 years from now? So we have to avoid the tendency to train them for their first job, although their first job is important, but give them the skills that they will need in order to be successful throughout their professional life. And what I'm talking about is being able to solve problems, being culturally competent, having a global perspective, being informationally literate, having ethics that we need. Right? So all of this is part of the education that we provide, and at the same time, it is part of the skills that you need to have a job. Because, you know, sometimes our academic language gets confused with the language that people speak and understand, right? There was a survey in Time magazine a few years ago, what are the expectations from college and what do you expect the students to do? The general public said job skills. The academic said critical thinking. People see this as a distance. I would argue that critical thinking is the #1 job skill. If you don't have critical thinking, you cannot have a job and you cannot keep a job after a few weeks. So you see, it is a combination of different things.
If I can say, I think Michael just brought up an excellent point. And I think one of the arguments we run into all the time is if we're preparing people for work, I certainly have to clarify this a lot, then what happens to the arts and what happens to, I think that's just such a false argument, this liberal arts versus technical. They go together. You can't have one without the other. We live in a very technical world, but we do need critical thinkers. We do need good communicators, and the arts and liberal arts helps you build that. So in all of our programs, we've built a foundation of that. So it's not one or the other. It's how do you combine both to prepare good citizens who's ready for the workforce. They're not independent. They work together.
The emphasis has been on STEM in recent times. There's been a pretty high focus on that throughout our higher education. Is that working for us, or are we ignoring some of these art skills as a result?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that you're talking to two engineers here, right? And the emphasis in the STEM fields is because of the demand that is there in the market. And there are national projections, national committees that they have looked at the deficit that we have in the STEM fields, and they project, based on the data that they have, that this deficit will continue. So the demand will continue for the STEM fields. Having said that, we have to be careful, right? There are social problems out there. If you walk a little bit away from these tall buildings in Chicago and you go south or west towards the neighborhoods, you will see them. They're staring you in the face. And these social problems need to be solved in order for our society to advance, and need to be solved by people who are prepared in this field, thinkers in the social sciences and workers in the social sciences. Because if we don't solve these problems, no matter how many STEM graduates we have and no matter how much the economy is doing better, we are not going to be advancing as a society. And we need to continue to advance the culture of this country, and we need to continue to celebrate the human condition And these are done by the graduates in the humanities and the arts. So yes, STEM fields are important, but I would argue that we have many more needs in this country as well.
Even as an engineer, you are saying that. Talk to us about the cost of college and how this is impacting that workforce, that entry-level workforce.
So that's where I think community colleges play increasingly a larger role. That's why I think it's so important when people hear about the college to careers, the centers of excellence, and hear about us having focus on making sure that students have skills they need to succeed. I think they don't understand that those skills include a path either right into the workforce, depending on what the demand is, or a path right to Michael's institution. I think we become increasingly a bigger part of the debt solution. When people have traditionally thought about community colleges, they've thought, okay, that's where students go who have either high remedial needs or they couldn't make it anyplace else. Let me just say, I graduated from City Colleges of Chicago, so that's not true. A proud graduate. I think they need to see us as a first option. Even if they plan to transfer to our great four-year institutions, if nothing else as a pathway to save on the cost of education. We are increasingly becoming a bigger role. But we also must make sure we have strong partnerships so that when they do transfer, what happened to me doesn't happen to them. When I transferred from Olive Harvey to IIT, only half my credits transferred. So how did that help me at all? So what Michael and I are working on is ensuring that that does not happen for the students that we're educating now. But we are increasingly becoming a bigger part of even the debt issue.
And for some students, this may be the right pathway, and for some others may not, and that's why you get a mix. And I have to admit that our sticker price is high. I'm referring to the sticker price because this year, 50% of our freshmen will pay less than $2,000 at the University of Illinois at Chicago, although the sticker price is $12,000 because of the grants, because of the fellowships that we have. Having said that, there is a reason why the sticker price is high, and there is a reason why a lot of middle-class families have to pay the sticker price. And this reason has to do with the way that we fund universities. It's time to have a public debate in this country about higher education. Is higher education a public good, or is it a private benefit? Because if we decide what it is, then we decide who is funding it. And if we decide that, well, we'll take the middle solution, it's both. How much of a public good or private benefit is the education of a plastic surgeon that right now practices in Beverly Hills versus the education of a second-grade teacher that is now working in rural South Carolina? We have to decide this, and we have to find ways to fund them in a different way. Because we are talking about taxes, we are talking about how we are going to cut the costs from a state standpoint. Let's talk about the real issue. Is higher education a public good or a private benefit?
And what do politicians think it is? After all, part of what has held up the full implementation of your reinvention really does have to do with, and going forward, how do you project 10 years out what your institution could be doing if you don't have that clarified by the politicians, right?
Yeah. And in Illinois, that's even more so true.
What has happened in Illinois? What is...
I cannot project 10 weeks out. You're talking about projecting 10 years out.
I think Mike was exactly right. We do need to have those conversations, but I also think until those conversations happen, the onus is on our institutions to ensure that we're operating as efficiently as possible. I think when we talk about higher education, we typically don't think about operations, or we don't think about those things that, I thought about when I was a vice president in the corporate sector. And we have to start thinking about those things too. How efficiently are we operating? Where are we investing our real dollars? And that's why metrics and success being defined is so important, because you know exactly where you need to invest your money. I think the Centers of Excellence model that we've created has allowed us to focus on quality as opposed to quantity. And this has created a big controversy because there's some who says, you know, I should, for instance, you know, I just built a $251 million health sciences college on the west side of Chicago. And there's those that says, well, you know, now it's just there, it should be at all your colleges. Well, if someone wants to help me build 6 more $251 million health sciences colleges, no problem. But I just think we have to start challenging the status quo and think about what's best for the future and how we prepare students for that and how we operate efficiently and know that it's not about quantity, it's about the quality. We live in a highly competitive world, and I think employers think about where the best training is coming from, and we have an obligation to try to provide that.
I see a reaction in the audience, so I want to encourage those of you who have questions. I'm going to give you a chance to ask a couple questions in a moment here, so get ready to find the microphone. But Chancellor Amiridis, I want you to speak to that too. This question about, as you began that discussion, about where the public good is and who's going to pay for all that? How do we do that? How do we think about financing, particularly the public institutions, going forward?
I think that there are creative models out there. There are models that they have been tried in other parts of the world. There are ideas that they have been kicked around in this country as well, commitments like the Peace Corps commitment, similar in terms of public service that one can provide after graduation from college in order to pay back some of the loans with work, actually, and not with money. I think that the universities have a responsibility also to become more flexible than we have been. The public universities are always talking about public higher education. More flexible, more innovative. Right?
More or less connected to business?
That doesn't bother me, quite frankly, because I think that the private sector has a role to play. They have unique core competencies that they can bring on campus to assist us with our operations. 30 years ago, when I came to this country and I went to graduate school, universities were like autonomous cities. They were cooking the food that they were serving the food, they were printing the books, they were selling the books. You see today that the private sector has come into a number of these areas, and the sun continues to rise from the east, right? And there hasn't been any significant problems. So there are opportunities for the universities to work with the private sector, bring the investments that they are needed from the private companies. Now, you have to watch these contracts like hawks, so you don't have disasters where people prey financially on our communities. But it's very doable, and after all, you know, this is the country of opportunity. It's okay for the private sector to make some money at the same time that we get high-end services and an infrastructure that we cannot afford on state funds right now.
Questions from the audience. Ooh, hands went up quickly. Are there microphones?
Back here. My name's John Amdor, and I work
Where are you, John?
right back
Right
here.
there, by light.
Right.
I work for a state legislator here in Illinois, one of those much maligned Illinois politicians. And I'm going to graduate from UIC with a master's degree someday.
So be kind.
Urban planning. But so, you know, I think when you look around the country, one of the, to my mind, troubling models for reform in higher education, it has taken place in Wisconsin with the changes to tenure and sort of the emphasis on private higher education, for-profit higher education. But here in Illinois, and I imagine it's much the same around the country, it can be really challenging for legislators and government officials to be strong allies when, as you indicated, the public has a strongly different expectation from what higher education is supposed to be for, and there is a perception, whether it's earned or whether it's appropriate or not, the institutions of higher education aren't good stewards of tax dollars. So I wonder, you know, where do you find a way to help people be better advocates? What are some reasonable changes that aren't as drastic as what we've seen in Wisconsin, but can help you become more efficient workplaces and help people who want to advocate for you do so?
Right. I'll just say, I think we do play a responsibility in, I think I'll just paraphrase what you said, helping our legislators understand the value of our institutions. and knowing that that's where investments should take place. I think when legislators see institutions holding themselves accountable for the outcomes of their institutions, when they see us trying to make more efficient choices and trying to create more efficient models, when they see employers partnered with our centers of excellence saying we need them to produce our future workforce, I think that will help them see the value. But if we sit around and traditionally do what, and I'm just speaking from a community college standpoint, if we sit around and we defend a 7% graduation rate, we say we want everything everywhere, if we say we don't want to be accountable for anything, then I'm not so sure they will see the value or know the seriousness of what we're doing. But I think holding ourselves accountable, partnering with our employers and our four-year institutions, having Michael say we need those students to succeed, that is my future, holding ourselves accountable to that and making operationally efficient decisions and models, I think helps them to see the value.
I think also, John, some of the universities, my own institution included, have failed to communicate the story of success that we represent. When you look at the University of Illinois at Chicago, with 40% of its students being first-generation students, more than 50% being Pell Grant recipients, which basically means that they are at or below the poverty limit when they come in. And then you see the graduation rates that we have. You see the success stories that we put out there. You see more than 200,000 graduates in the city of Chicago and the impact that they have. We haven't moved our flag very, very heavily in front of the people who need to see it. I love transparency and accountability. Hold us accountable. Let's have a new compact with the state of Illinois, where we will be held accountable for certain outcomes, and then the state will promise us that there is going to be a stable funding mechanism for the universities for the next 8 years.
Exactly.
Word. Just another quick question in the back.
Hello, my name's Janet Ginsburg. I've been writing about a lot of these issues quite a bit lately. And I was really interested in what you were mentioning with STEM and the focus on STEM. Aren't those jobs the most likely to be affected by AI, robotics, big data? In other words, are those employees going into that field the first to be replaced?
Right, putting themselves out of it, in effect, by their own invention.
Let me give my 2 cents about this whole notion about technology and its influence on the future of our workforce. And again, keep in mind, as Michael said, we are 2 engineers sitting up here. There's a lot of discussion around that, what technology will do to the future of our workforce. I think what we don't talk about is how many jobs technology has created. I think at the end of the day, we all know that once you graduate high school, some post-secondary education will be needed, and technology will play a big part in that because we live in a technical world. I don't think it may eliminate some, but it will create more. It will create a different skill set. I think what's most important is none of us have a crystal ball and can really predict or for certain what the future will be. But I think what's important is that our institutions are set up with structures that can quickly respond and monitor whatever that change is and ensure that the people that come to us are prepared for that. But also, how do we service employees for their incumbent workers to make sure they also get trained as their industry changes and they're not displaced?
The question was more focused on what you were talking about with liberal arts and social sciences versus STEM, and the focus so heavily on STEM.
Yeah.
What we learned this morning was that I think there were 3 things the McKinsey person had that looked at those jobs are going. But the jobs that were more really with liberal arts, critical thinking, social sciences, people, those were a little bit more difficult to replace. So how do you balance this sort of overemphasis on STEM?
Well, I'm not a labor economist, and it doesn't make much sense to have a labor economist type of debate in a proxy way, right? But the way that I heard it from the expert, from the labor economist, was that you know, the jobs that may need to be replaced, not gone necessarily, but replaced, are in two categories. It's the low wages and low skills in some of the manufacturing processes and so on. And then there may be some high-end jobs in data collection and data analysis. If I remember, these were the correct quotes. When you're talking about STEM fields, right, when you're talking about engineering jobs, for example, in a manufacturing environment, there are only 3 or 4 engineers in the manufacturing environment, and there are around 50 or 100 other people that they do labor in there. Right. If you're going to replace parts of labor with automation, the engineers are not going to be that much affected. It's going to be the labor that will be affected.
Right.
Now, the data analysis is a different story. These are STEM jobs as well. And then the question is, what else is created? That's my summary from what I thought I heard as a non-labor economist this morning.
Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time, but I appreciate both of you being with us and all of your participation as well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.